Hey guys, how's it going and welcome back. We have a Western Digital 1 terabyte rated at 3500 megabits per second read, and they don't say the right speed on the box, but we're within plus or minus. Anyways, so $109 over at Best Buy. Picked it up a few days ago when I was in town, and I needed another NVMe drive. I've had this case for a while, which I'm going to show you that too, so the camera's probably going to have to refocus a little bit. We'll have to see how that goes. But anyways, so hopefully you can kind of see that. So it's, I can't pronounce it, sorry, but it's got dual protocol. So it can run Type-C to Type-A on your 3.1 Gen 2 M.2 SSD hard drive case, blah blah blah. It's also got the Type-C to Type-C cable as well, which is a longer cable. Do not use the cable unless you want to lose almost, well, you're going to lose about 100 and some megabits per second. You need a very short, good quality, because the cables that come with this, although they work well, they're not high quality cables, but they're also not the world's fastest, regardless of what the specs may say. I had a very short, somewhere around about a 10-inch cable, I guess, that was also, you know, braided cable, high quality, and high-speed Type-C cable, and it actually gained me about, well, pretty close to about 150 megabits per second. So I'm running almost 900 megabits per second without any problems, read and write on this drive in this case. Now it's a cheap case. Technically I should be running a Thunderbolt case if I want any more speed, and so should you. But it kind of depends on where your budget sits and what's available to you, etc. Right? I mean, the drive in itself, that was $109. That took a chunk of my cash. And then this for $29. Well, I'd bought this thing months ago because I wanted the longer cable actually for a different Western Digital external drive that I had bought, which I'm happy to say is still working perfectly fine. Okay, Western Digital makes some really good stuff, so I have no qualms about that. They've been in business for decades. Anyhow, so don't expect to get massive speeds out of this, but you will get some really good speed out of the drive with the case. But around that 900-ish, okay, is about what you can expect out of what it's rated. If you want more speed than that out of the drive unit, it needs more amperage, because the Thunderbolt drive, the Thunderbolt port and Type-C ports tend to only have 900 milliamps of output, whereas the Type-A's are only 500 milliamps. So this thing's going to really poke down if you use the Type-C to Type-A cable, right? And of course you're going to find that your temps are going to rise hotter too on any drive, period, when it's not getting the amperage it requires. And it needs the amperage to get the speeds going, right? The voltage is always going to be, you know, 5 volts available. These drives, the NVMEs, they tend to run anywhere between 2 to 3.8 volt amps is about what they usually want. And you only have 900 out of a Thunderbolt or Type-C, so let me think about this. We need more power, which means we should have a powered case of some sort. I have not even checked to see if there are actual powered Type-C cases, but I have looked into the Thunderbolt ones, and there is a powered Thunderbolt case we can get, but it's several $100s. It's not going to be cheap. You know, if you want to play in the game, you got to pay the piper. You know what I mean? It's kind of like the choice of buying, you know, one of two platforms of computers. If you want very cheap and inexpensive and really not the world's best performance, you buy a Windows computer. If you want super high performance, you buy a Mac. But then again, it depends on the Mac you buy, it depends on the PC you buy, right? It's kind of a toss-up on that one. So yeah, some of you panicked before I said that, I know. But anyways, yeah, the Macs right now are unbeatable by anything in the Windows world. Thank you, Apple, for the M2s. Okay, and the M3s are going to be even more cookie power. Intel is so done at this point, unless they go to ARM. But anyways, so the case is great. The drive is great. Overall, I'm going to give the case, I'm definitely going to look at the case at being an easy I give it a 4 out of 5. The only reason is it will not support a drive that already has a heat sink on it. But they do give you thermotape, so you're going to have to buy a drive unit that does not already have its own built-in heat sink. Something like even the XPG Game Tricks stick that I have with its NVMe, it's in my dock and the lid just closes, right? Because it has its own heatsink and it's non-removable either, right? So it's kind of like, well, but the Western Digital didn't have a heatsink with it. Fantastic. Slide her right in, throw the thermotape on that came with this case, and it also has the metal top that connects, and boom, you've got a really nice cooler there. Though the drives are still going to get very hot though, under even light loads, because we don't have the amperage for the drive to be fed for the drive to run top performance. So yes, the drives do run on lower amperage, but the problem with that is you lose a lot of speed. So even in docks that are powered, unless you have enough amperage coming into that powered dock from a wall art, okay, then you're not going to get any real performance, and you're still going to lack performance. Because one of the things I've been finding with the QuizLab hub lately, which I'll be doing an update review on, but a little bit of a sneak on this one, is even when I took out my 480, which is a laptop style, because the ports on this thing for the internal drives, you have one NVMe and one normal SSD port. The Kingston drive chews up 1 amp. Okay, I didn't put a Western Digital in there because the Western Digital I have chews up 1.6 amps, and that's perfectly fine for putting into like a laptop or a desktop system that has that internal bus connector. But when you're dealing with docks, the lower the amperage drive you can put into one of these docks, the better it's going to be, right? But I have not even seen a laptop sized SSD even that's chewing up less than 1 amp. So it's kind of like, ugh. And I only have a 3 amp power plug, and I still have to feed 3 Type A's, 2 different card readers, and a Type C port up front, plus the little idiot lights that are on the front of this thing, right? So it's kind of one of those things. And when you use a separate power supply, you no longer use voltage from the computer for when you connect the hub to your computer. The only thing you're using is a little bit of the amperage with that you pull just to say, hey, I'm a hub. Here's my junk my owner is wanting to use, right? And that's about is the extent that it goes, right? So you definitely got to have at least a 5 amp power supply to even route enough power to the front ports. Because another thing I've been finding too is I did try plugging that Western Digital 1.6 amp hog into the front port, and it came online momentarily, but as soon as I tried to copy some stuff, it would knock itself off, and then it would bounce back on, knock itself off. So there's definitely no way to stably run an SSD drive off of a port that is only providing 500 milliamps. And I'm not even actually getting the 500 because I'm chewing everything that I can take from that 3 amp power supply, but it's still, the hub still routes power away from the NVMe and SSD slot to feed the ports. It has to balance out what it can. So I'm really not even getting enough load power to the drive and to the ports to properly feed. So I got to watch how many things I plug in, but also watch what I plug in. So my card, for example, for my DSLR camera, it actually chews up 500 milliamps, right? That's what it wants, and that's all that slot is being designated to, is the 500. So I can't plug anything else in when I have my card in there, or one of them is going to get knocked offline. So I'm still lacking amperage. And it's hard to find a 5 amp power supply too. A 4 amp, much more common. Maybe a 4 amp would definitely do the trick. Because currently right now the only 5 amp one I can find is from Apple. And it's actually a newer power supply in the last year. And it's I think it's what 146 watts or something at 5 amps. So it's got more than enough. But I can't find anything on Amazon anywhere or anybody else that has an actual real 5 amp one. And what I did buy, which according to the write-up was supposed to be a 5 amp, turns out it's only 3. Okay, so at least it's better than having nothing, and it's better than being less than 3 amps. So this is a problem with drives. I'm going to go more in depth into that stuff on a video, because everybody really needs to understand how these drives are working, how cards are reading, your other USB devices, and how much kind of power you have out of your computers, etc., etc. Because even without having a hub on there, people have still managed to blow ports out, right? You know, and it's kind of like, once the port's blown, that's it. There's no repairing it. So yeah, new computer. Thank you. Goodbye. Anyways, so the drive itself though, 4 1/4 or a 5, I have no problem with that. I wish it came with thermo tape, considering it doesn't have a heatsink. But the case did come with it. So whatever case you do buy, make sure it does come with it, because probably nobody, or if there is anybody, it's very few companies that would actually give you the thermo tape with the drive, because you're going to need it, okay, regardless. Even if you have enough amperage, you're still going to need that thermo tape, okay. It's going to be handy, because it's going to help things run cooler, which is going to be a lot more stable. Or even at the same amount of amperage available, like if you plugged this drive, for example, onto a motherboard on a PC or motherboard on a Mac, because there are Macs that do have internal NVMEs, which is a real pain to get at in the iMacs, but you know, there are Macs that do have them. The thermo tape would be very handy to keep it running cooler. So that this way, even when you're getting more than enough amperage, the drives will still run hot, but they won't run anywhere near as hot as when you're starving them for amperage. When you starve a drive for amperage, you can actually cook the drive. Okay, so, and I've already cooked a USB stick, because the stick wanted more than what was available, and luckily for me, it took out the stick and not my port. I actually got saved on that one, because the load I put the stick under for a massive copy, it just said no more, and it just went poof, and that was the end of that stick. So we don't do heavy loads off ports anymore onto USB sticks, you know, let alone coming off the stick. We don't do a massive copy load, you know, because I usually only buy 64 gig sticks, but 64 gig, when you're writing to it, actually heats up the drive more than when you're reading from it. So reading is not generally a huge deal. But the writing to it, yeah, it can be a big deal, and it can cook the drive either way. Anyway, so this is getting crazy in life with computer tech, isn't it? It's just like more. You know, is all it seems to be, and it's like, where does it end? But anyway, that's the world we live in. So anyway, do check out the drive at least anyways. It's a fantastic drive. But the drive is only going to give you, with a good quality short cable, you're going to see speeds around really close to that 900 megabits read and write. If you use the included long cable, you're only going to see mid 700s read and write out of the longer cable that comes with it. It's just a very skimpy, cheap cable. But it's a cheap case too, but the case in itself is pretty good quality. But the maximum speed you're going to see is still going to be around the 900-ish read and write. Even if you put in a 7,000 megabit per second read and write drive, you're going to get the exact same results as I'm getting on this. Okay? So that's kind of where you're going to be at with that. So I would definitely suggest, if you want the bigger speed access out of that drive, then either you throw it internally, but if you're going with external cases, I would definitely recommend seeing if there's a case out there for Type-C that could run actually somewhat quicker. I highly doubt it though, because Type-C is extremely limited to speeds, but I would definitely go Thunderbolt, especially if you have a Thunderbolt port, because that's the only way you'd do it. And Mac people, we all have Thunderbolt ports, right? So I think we should be going with Thunderbolt cases. Now, if you're still if you don't want to spend the big money on the powered Thunderbolt case, which will give you very close to those speeds, if you don't want to spend the money on that, then at least find a case that the controller board has the rated capabilities to get at least somewhat close to your speed, because the boards also control a lot of that speed. you know, because of the porting, right? But the boards also have another control feature to them where the highest end case I found so far externally, it'll actually run a 7,000 megabit per second drive, very close to its rating. So it'll easily put this thing as fast as it can possibly go, because even though the rating is here, it's an up to rating. You'll never see 35 by 3000. It's not going to happen. Same thing as you go 75 by 7,000 or whatever it is, or 6,500. You will never actually see that actual speed, but you'll see very close to that speed, okay? But to get there, it's going to cost, okay? Standard Thunderbolt cases, there are a few of them out there, and they all have different support standards for speeds that they can process under the Thunderbolt straight plug and go without power. But like I said, I only found one so far that was a powered ported case, so it's using its own independent power supply, its own everything. And that case will run a 7,000 plus megabit per second drive very close to that rated speed. But that case is very expensive, okay? So you've got to kind of go like, okay, well, if I'm going to spend that kind of money on the case, because I need those speeds, especially for video editing, then I'm definitely not going to buy a 1 terabyte drive, obviously. I'm going to buy probably like a 4 terabyte to make it worthwhile for the money differences, right? But anyways, that's what we've got for you on this video. It's kind of like a dual review in a way. But if you're just interested in this, fine, no big deal. But like I said, the included cables, although they do work, you're going to see a little bit less speed out of that Type-C to Type-C connection with that short cheap cable, or long cheap cable, sorry, as opposed to going to a shorter cable that's also better quality too, because they're not exactly high-end cables. They put more money into the case on this thing than they did onto the cables. And I had a short, high-quality cable, and that made a world of difference over its original cable. And, you know, because a little over 100 plus megabits per second read and write is a big difference, depending on what you're doing, right? And it's all about time, too, in that speed access. So, yeah, that's kind of where things sit for now. But I'm going to experiment more with cases too along the road, and more drives, of course, etc. And we'll see how things go and see what kind of really great combination we can come up with eventually. But anyways, till next time, thanks so much for watching and taking time for this video, and we'll catch you in the next one. See ya!